again, everybody. Welcome to another, I guess you can call it, short version of the MMA Outsiders for this week. I'm Tom Albano, as always, here on the MMA Outsiders. Again, Sam Bando unable to join us this week due to the passing of his grandfather. Again, our thoughts are with you, Zan. So yesterday, this is the second of a three-part series of shorter videos that I'm going to do to discuss the kind of topics that Sam and I were going to talk about. So yesterday's video, I recapped some of the action from this past weekend. Johnny Eblen's middleweight title victory over Fabian Edwards at Bellator 299, and the injury suffered by Rafael Fiziev and his loss to Mateusz Gamrot, and what this means for Gamrot going forward. Today, we're going to focus on the UFC 295, UFC 296 card announcements. Before we get into all that, make sure to hit the like button, subscribe, hit the notification bell so you get notified of everything here at the Empty the Bench Network. We just passed 550 subscribers. Big thank yous to all of you out there for supporting the channel, and we hope that you stay with us as we continue to grow and reach new plateaus, reach new milestones. Thank you so much for all of your support. Again, I'm Tom Albano. You can find my work over at Bandsided MMA, and you can find my work also with the Professional Fighters League and their website recapping all the big events. Obviously, got the PFL Europe playoff card coming up with the debut of Cedric Doumbé. So I will be reporting on that, and then, of course, I'll be reporting in a couple of months on Black Friday when PFL has its championships card for the 2023 season. So stay with me on that. You can follow me on social media at Thomas J. Albano. You can follow MMA Outsiders at MMA Outsiders ETB on Facebook, Instagram, and X. And you can follow the Empty the Bench Podcast Network at ETB Network, Facebook, X, Instagram, and TikTok. Okay, so let's talk about the UFC 295 and UFC 296 cards. The announcement came, I believe, late last week. On social media, thanks to one Dana White, of course. Now, there's a lot that has been talked about with this card, with these two cards. Zan and I did our fair share of wondering about how these cards were going to play out, and play out it has. So we've got Yuri Prochazka versus Alex Pereira, that vacant light heavyweight title fight that has been confirmed. Edwards Covington has been confirmed. We also have a flyweight title fight that has been confirmed. Nothing yet on Sean O'Malley. There is the potential that it could be one of the first fights for 2024, at least according to Zan and I's predictions. I actually just saw before a little flash of something about one of the potential titles that could be on the line in early 2024 as well, perhaps with Alex Volkanovski, if I'm not mistaken. So there is some movement here. There is some movement about what could happen to end the year and to start the next year. Unfortunately, Alex Volkanovski, that's right, within the last day, tweeting January sounds good to me. So it is there. Those rumors have started. However, I know Dana White talked about this last month, but it's just been a mystery upon all mysteries ever since. But it now does appear to be official. There will be no Conor McGregor versus Michael Chandler in 2023. Not part of the 295 card, not announced for the 296 card. This fight will not happen. Now, as I mentioned, Dana White on the day of UFC 292 in Boston, that was the day where we had the Ultimate Fighter finale fights. And that was where I had made mention, feels like eons ago, that was basically going to be the last chance for them to make some sort of announcement as a means of, getting all the hype that it possibly could a McGregor-Chandler fight. But Dana, during an interview, a podcast interview, said that basically it's going to happen in 2024. Of course, with the fact that it's Conor McGregor, everything seemed to be fluctuating. But now, about a month and a week later, we get the UFC 295 and 296 announcements. This fight is nowhere to be seen. It's not happening. So, what can I say? What a disappointment. Honestly, I was losing hope that this fight, day after day, I just lost more and more hope that this fight would ever happen. But now this is just utterly ridiculous. Because, and I've said it before, I said it during Tough Enough, I said it in the lead up to 292, I said it in the aftermath of 292. If we're not having this fight this year, let alone at all, then what was the point of Tough? What was the point of The Ultimate Fighter? The Ultimate Fighter, the way it was designed this season, was to hype the return of Conor McGregor. And now all of a sudden, it's ever since that's been announced, it's, Conor hasn't pissed in the cup. He hasn't taken the USADA, testing. That, there's this, USADA issue that they're looking for the exemption, but USADA isn't giving it. Or Conor's no longer interested in fighting Michael Chandler. He wasn't happy with Chandler on the show. At this point, to take the words of some of my students, this whole McGregor Chandler stuff is now poppycock. Like, seriously, how much? What else can I say? I have ranted and raved about this subject before. Now, there's only one idea that could be in my mind. Now, Zan and I did a whole UFC outlook for 2023 and the rest of 2023 and all of 2024, what the pay-per-view schedule could kind of look like, potential main events, playing long-term armchair matchmaker, if you will. And Zan and I talked about the potential that if McGregor Chandler does not happen this year, potentially it could happen Super Bowl weekend. I know Zan had mentioned, the idea of them being in Sydney Super Bowl weekend. So my instinct is maybe Alex Volkanovski would headline again. Maybe depending on whoever wins the lightweight title fight within the coming month, maybe they headline Sydney. I know we talked about the idea of potentially them being in Las Vegas Super Bowl weekend. So you have the UFC pay-per-view on Saturday, and then the next day the Super Bowl. Maybe a little too tough. I think Zan even mentioned last week, maybe a little too tough to get those kinds of events in the same area about the same time, in just one sitting. But these two not fighting in 2023, not fighting Super Bowl weekend, despite all the rumors, there is one idea of Zan and I's that's still on the board. Perhaps they are saving McGregor versus Chandler for late March or early April, UFC 300. Now, my one takeaway on that, my one thought of that, I have multiple thoughts, but my one big one is, why it makes sense because McGregor is the big star and they tend to go all out with the UFC, 100 pay-per-views. So UFC 100 was big, where you had the Lesnar-Mir rematch. You had appearances by George St. Pierre and a young John Jones. UFC 200, obviously, they tried the Conor Nate rematch. They tried the Jones DC rematch. But you still had a lot of stars surrounding it. It didn't exactly play out the best. You had Brock Lesnar return, and then he popped, which, by the way, Mark Hunt just lost his case, so it's interesting. I know people are teasing now, McGregor's going to get a USADA exemption this week then. I'll believe it when I see it at this point. But the idea of McGregor versus Chandler in 2024 at UFC 300, I get it. I honestly do. At the same time, I don't know why you do tough, and then it's gonna take all this time for these two to match. But at the same time, like I said, I kind of get it because UFC 300, you want all your big stars. The one thing now that I'm looking at Zan's UFC schedule outlook that didn't click in my mind last week, that is now clicking now, is he has UFC 300, T-Mobile Arena in Las Vegas. No surprise, but he has it on April 6th. But one thing that hit my mind in the time between last week's episode and now is that date might be a problem. That's why I said late March, early April. Because obviously one of the other stories that's being talked about right now, the WWE UFC merger TKO is officially happening. You've got the board of directors with Vince McMahon apart, Dana White now the CEO of the UFC, no longer the president. And my suspicion is that we've seen it occasionally over the last year or so. Like the UFC 288 card, for instance, that took place on the first Saturday in May, which also was the same day of Backlash. Pardon me, of Backlash in San Juan, Puerto Rico, I believe it was. That was the appearance of Bad Bunny for the wrestling fans that remember that, where he fought Damian Priest in the street fight. My one issue is something like that. Now that WWE and the UFC are essentially in bed together, I think they're going to try their damnedest to not have events on the same day. Now, it might be a little more difficult because WWE now, most of their premium live events, as they called it, or as we old school people like to call it, pay-per-views, or WWE Network special events, whatever, Peacock events, whatever you want to call it, they have now been moved to Saturday for the most part, which makes a lot of sense. You get a bigger audience, the kids can stay up. But it is a little difficult when you're dealing with two companies, two sports organizations, where their big events are going to be on Saturdays. Now, there has been a rumor that potentially WWE could move their premium live events back to Sundays in the wake of this merger. I don't know how well that's going to go over, but regardless whether or not it happens, April 6th, the date that Zan has for UFC 300, is the same day, I believe, that night one of WrestleMania 40 is scheduled to take place in Philadelphia. So if I'm TKO officials, I'm probably shutting that idea down. I maybe would not mind having UFC 300 the week before, say on March 31st, that would be. I would have to double check the dates here because 2024 is going to be a leap year. Yeah, it's going to be a leap year. So actually, he has on here UFC 299 for March 3rd. That would be March 2nd. So March 30th would be an interesting idea. So they could do UFC 300 March 30th, or they could wait till April 13th, maybe April 20th. They're willing to wait a little while longer for a potential UFC 300 card. But I kind of digress. My point is, I get why they would do McGregor versus Chandler UFC 300. I just hate the fact that it's taking all this time, all this confusing build of how bad Tough was, and or the frustrations of Tough, I should say, because there were some pretty damn good fights on this past season of Tough. But some of the frustrations of how the season went, how the season was produced, the build of Conor's return, that is going to be the biggest comeback in sports history. Ha ha ha. Oh, wait a minute. Thank you. And then all this, piss in the cup, Conor, and he's not pissing in the cup, and you're trying to get the exemption, but Saudi wants nothing to do with that, and at this rate, I'll believe a McGregor-Chandler fight happens when I see an official announcement. But I do briefly want to talk about the UFC 295 and 296 cards that did get announced. I love the co-main event, Yuri versus Alex Pereira. I thought they were going to do this, say, in January or in December in Vegas or in January. But I love it. UFC 295, you got the heavyweight and light heavyweight titles on the line. You got Jones Miocic going to throw down, and then you got Yuri Prochazka, and Alex Pereira, two badasses competing for the light heavyweight title. And I cannot wait to see that happen. That's going to be Massacre City. And then you got Leon Edwards versus Colby Covington. The welterweight title will headline Las Vegas. I had a feeling at one point they said about why, there was no co-main event announced for 295. That report from Colby about, oh, John Jones doesn't want me on the 295 card. And Sam, if you're listening out there, I called it, that they were looking at Edwards Covington. They had to, as a backup main event. And Connor Chandler falls through. And here it is. Edwards Covington will be headlining 296 in December. After all, I do love the co-main event, though. I have been big on Brandon Royval, ever since his arrival to the UFC. I had watched some of his stuff. I had watched some of his stuff on the regional scene, and I remember writing a piece for Fanside where I said, hey, flyweight needs a lot of, an influx of talent. Brandon Royval can provide that talent. And here he is. He and Pantoja are going to be fighting for the flyweight title, 296. I'm big on that, although Pantoja, he is going to be one tough, scrappy competitor. This is going to be a fight that is must-see, a fight that it's probably going to need more attention than it's actually going to get. So Pantoja, Royval, do not sleep on that. I think I'm more excited for that fight than I am for Edwards versus Covington. Because again, I talked about it before, Covington, he's getting this title shot off a win over Jorge Masvidal in March of 2022. And now he's going to get this title fight. It's ridiculous in my mind. All right. Also, Tony Ferguson booked against Paddy Pimblett. Shame on the UFC. I'm really interested in seeing Paddy's rise, but I've said that I'm really concerned about Tony Ferguson's health, that he needs to retire, and here he is. He's going to fight again, and I'm sorry. I don't know if I can bring myself to watch that fight. I want to see Paddy's rise, but man, that's bad. And like I said, shame on the UFC for putting the green light and go ahead on such a fight. All right, that's going to do it for me. Make sure to like button, subscribe, hit the notification bell so you get notified of everything here at the Empty Bench Network. Follow us across social media at MMA Outsiders ETB, Facebook, X, and Instagram. Follow the Empty Bench Podcast Network on social media at ETB Network, Facebook, X, Instagram, and TikTok. Again, I'm Tom Albano. Find my work over at Fanside MMA and with the Professional Fighters League, the PFL, on their website. You can follow me on social media at Thomas J. Albano. Make sure to go to etbpodcast.com for all content, all questions, and information related to the Empty Bench Network, plus blogs from a bunch of our hosts here at the ETB Network and other ETB personalities. Take Empty the Bench Podcast Network and the MMA Outsiders on the road with you through our audio-only platform of Acast. And don't forget to check out the video feed here on youtube.com/ETB Network. 550 plus subscribers and counting. We thank you for all of your support. I'm out of here. I'm Tom Albano. I'll see you tomorrow where we'll preview the big super middleweight title fight in the boxing world between Canelo Alvarez and Jermell Charlo. Take care, everyone.